There are moments in life when time doesn't slow down, it sharpens. Not like a film reel creeping into slow motion, but like glass, clear, dangerous, and ready to cut through everything you thought you knew about the world. It was just past midnight when Claire drove over the Jefferson Bridge. Her 5-year-old son, Micah, was asleep in the back seat, a stuffed bear nestled under one arm, his thumb resting near his lips. The hum of the car was the only sound in the dark, cold silence of January. Claire had taken the long way home from her shift at the hospital. She always did on nights like this, when her bones felt hollow from too many hours and too few thank yous. The bridge was her reset button. Something about the way the city lights reflected on the black water below made her feel like maybe things could still make sense, even if just for a second. But tonight, the reflection was wrong. She saw a figure, still, perched on the outer edge of the bridge, like a shadow torn from the sky and pinned to the steel. She didn't think. Her foot slammed the brakes before her mind caught up. The tires screamed. Micah stirred in the back, murmuring something she couldn't make out. She threw the car in park and jumped out, her shoes slapping the cold asphalt as the wind knifed through her scrubs. The air smelled like metal and river water. He was young. That was the first thing she noticed. Couldn't have been more than 19. Maybe 20. Hood pulled up. Shoulders hunched. Hands gripping the railing so tight his knuckles looked like bone. He didn't hear her approach. Or maybe he did and didn't care. Claire's voice cut through the night like a match struck in darkness. Please don't jump. He didn't flinch. Didn't move. Just stood there, staring down into nothing. Her breath came out in clouds. She stepped closer. I have a kid in the car. He's asleep. He's 5. He still thinks life is safe. Still no response. I'm not saying this to guilt you, she added. I'm saying it because I know how it feels to stand at the edge of something and not know how to come back. He turned slightly, just enough for her to catch a glimpse of his face. Pale, wet, eyes hollowed out from the inside. Why'd you stop? He asked. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't anything. Just gone. Claire swallowed. Because you're someone's son. He let out a small, bitter laugh. Not anymore. She moved closer. I don't know what you've been through, she said. And I'm not gonna pretend I have the answers. But I've seen people die. I've held hands as breath left bodies. I've called families in the middle of the night. It's never clean. It's never simple. And it's never without fallout. He looked down again. The wind whipped his hoodie back slightly, revealing a mess of dark, tangled hair and a deep scar under his jaw. She didn't ask about it. Instead, she said something she hadn't said out loud in years. My name's Claire. I got pregnant when I was 19. My parents stopped talking to me. The guy disappeared before Micah was even born. I worked the night shift at a diner, then at a clinic, then at the ER. I cry in my car more often than I'd like to admit. Sometimes I feel like the world doesn't see me unless I'm useful to someone else. But I'm still here. He blinked, slowly. Why are you telling me all that? He asked. Because you matter, she said. Even if you feel invisible. Even if it hurts too much to breathe. He shifted his weight. Not toward the rail, but away from it. Just slightly. It was enough. Claire took one final step forward. What's your name? He hesitated. Then, Luca. She nodded, relief spreading across her chest like warmth from a long-dead fire reigniting. Luca, she said gently, would you come with me? Just to the car. Just for a minute. You don't have to explain anything. His lips parted, but no sound came out. For a moment, she thought he was going to run, or worse. But then he climbed down. Clumsy. Slow. Like his body was betraying his brain. And when he stood in front of her, eyes rimmed with salt and sky, Claire did the only thing she knew how to do. She opened her arms. He didn't fall into them. Not at first. He stood there, frozen. Then he broke. Not loudly. Not violently. Just a slow, collapsing sort of grief. Like a dam failing one crack at a time. And Claire held him. Not because she knew him, but because someone had to. Behind her, in the car, Micah stirred again. Claire led Luca to the passenger seat and helped him buckle in. He didn't say much. Didn't look her in the eye. But he let her drive. They sat in silence, the kind that hums with all the things left unsaid. Claire didn't ask questions. She just drove. It wasn't until they were almost at her apartment that he whispered, "I didn't think anyone would stop." Claire looked at him, eyes soft. "Neither did I." He smiled. Barely. But it was real. And she had no idea, no clue, how this night would unravel everything she thought she knew. Because Luca wasn't just some stranger on a bridge. He was holding a truth that belonged to her, too. One that would force her to relive a past she thought she'd buried forever. The apartment was dim when Claire pushed the door open, the hallway light flickering above them like it couldn't decide whether to die or hold on. She carried Micah in her arms, the boy's head resting against her shoulder, warm breath against her neck. His stuffed bear dangled from one hand, nearly dragging across the floor. Luca hesitated at the door. He stood just outside, hands shoved deep in the pocket of a hoodie that now looked thinner, more fragile, under the cheap fluorescent light. His shoes were soaked. Mud lined the hem of his jeans. Claire nodded gently. "You can come in. I won't ask anything." He nodded, eyes darting to the sleeping boy in her arms. And then, wordlessly, he stepped across the threshold like it cost him something. Claire gestured toward the small couch. "You can sit. I just need to lay him down." She disappeared into the bedroom. The apartment was small, only 2 rooms, the second one converted into a space barely large enough for a child's bed and a plastic drawer set filled with clothes. From the living room, Luca could hear the whisper of her voice as she murmured something to Micah, probably tucking him in, maybe kissing his forehead. It sounded foreign. Soft. Like something from a life he wasn't sure he'd ever been part of. When she came back out, Claire didn't sit. She stood by the tiny kitchenette, pouring water into a chipped mug, steam curling upward like a ghost. "I don't have coffee," she said. "But I can make tea." Luca shook his head. "I'm good." She brought the mug over anyway and placed it gently on the table between them. Not pushing. Just offering. They sat in silence. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. Outside, sirens wailed faintly. Far enough to feel distant, close enough to feel real. Finally, Claire spoke, her voice careful, like stepping over glass. "Is there someone I can call for you? A friend? Family?" He stared at the mug, unmoving. "No one." She didn't press. Instead, she took a sip of her tea, then asked something softer. "How long have you been feeling like this?" He didn't answer at first. Then, "A while." Claire nodded slowly. "I'm not trying to fix you, Luca. I just want to understand." That seemed to loosen something in him. He leaned back, head tilted toward the ceiling. "I had a place," he said. "A job. Nothing great, just enough to scrape by. Then, stuff happened. I got evicted. I bounced between couches for a bit, until people stopped picking up the phone. It's easier to disappear than explain." Claire's voice was quiet. "But you didn't disappear." "Didn't I?" he asked, his eyes sharp now. Standing on that bridge felt like being erased. The world kept spinning, and I wasn't part of it anymore. Claire met his gaze. "But you didn't jump." He blinked. "Because you stopped." "No," she said. "Because something inside you wanted to live. Even if it was buried under everything else." Luca looked away. Silence settled again, but it wasn't empty. It was full of weight. Of what hadn't yet been said. Of what neither of them fully understood. Claire stood and moved to a drawer. She pulled out a folded blanket, handed it to him without a word, and pointed toward the couch. You can sleep here tonight, she said. Luca didn't move. She softened her tone. Just rest. That's all. He took the blanket, his fingers brushing hers briefly. They were ice cold. That night, Claire lay in bed with her eyes wide open, staring at the cracked ceiling. Micah was curled up beside her, one hand resting on her forearm, as if anchoring her in place. But her mind wasn't in the room. It was back on that bridge. The way Luca had looked at the water. The way his voice had sounded. Flat, like the color had been drained from it. She had seen that look before. Once. Years ago. In the mirror. She had been 17, holding a pregnancy test in a Walmart bathroom, her face pale and her heart slamming against her ribs. She'd thought about it then, about vanishing, about slipping between cracks no one would notice. The shame, the fear, the way her father's voice would echo down the hall before he stopped speaking to her altogether. But she hadn't disappeared. Because someone, an old nurse in a free clinic, had told her, "You are not a mistake. No matter how loud the world screams otherwise." And now, years later, she found herself whispering the same to a stranger. "You are not a mistake." But as she drifted off to sleep, one thought wrapped itself around her chest and refused to let go. Why did he look so familiar? The morning came reluctantly, hidden behind thick clouds and the kind of rain that seemed less like weather and more like grief falling from the sky. Claire woke to the sound of the sink dripping. It was the kind of sound you forget you hear until you're alone with your thoughts. Sharp, repetitive, almost accusatory. Micah was still asleep, curled tightly under his rocket ship blanket. She kissed his forehead, whispering his name into the small space between his dreams and the real world. He didn't stir. When she stepped into the living room, Luca was already awake. He hadn't used the blanket. It sat untouched beside him on the couch. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in days, not just hours. His gaze moved slowly, landing on the window where the rain painted shaky rivers against the glass. Claire didn't say anything at first. Instead, she moved into the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee, cheap, burnt, overbrewed, and set it in front of him. He blinked at it like it was a relic from another lifetime. "I don't have sugar," she said. "Micah's dentist gave me a guilt trip." Luca cracked the smallest smile. It lasted less than a breath, but it was real. Claire sat down across from him. Her voice was careful, not soft exactly, but precise. "Did you sleep at all?" He shook his head. "Didn't want to." "Nightmares?" "No," he said. "Reality." She didn't ask what he meant. She just let the silence breathe between them. Then, almost as if pulled by a string he couldn't see, Luca reached into his pocket and pulled out something folded and worn. Paper, crumpled, stained at the corners. He slid it across the table. Claire hesitated, picked it up. It was a photo. Her hand froze. The image was old, maybe 15, 16 years ago. A woman holding a baby in her arms, seated on a hospital bed, an exhausted but glowing smile on her face. The edges of the photo were frayed from time and touch. The woman was her. Claire's chest tightened. Her stomach dropped. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. Luca's voice broke through the thickness of the moment. "That's you. Right." She looked up at him, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. "Where did you get this?" His eyes didn't flinch. "I've had it my whole life." Her lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. Luca leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his hands clenched tightly together. "My mother gave it to me before she died. Said it was the only picture of the woman who gave birth to me." Claire felt the world tilt beneath her. No, it couldn't be. She'd never. But there it was. The truth staring back at her from a faded photograph she didn't even remember being taken. Luca's voice was quieter now. Measured. "She told me you were young. 17. That you were scared. That you didn't abandon me. But that you didn't have a choice." Claire's breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be real. But it was. She remembered the pregnancy before Micah. The one her parents wouldn't let her keep. The closed-door conversations. The aunt in Ohio who took her in for the final months. The hospital she was rushed to when her water broke too soon. The baby they wouldn't let her hold for more than a minute. She remembered the weight of him. The smell of his skin. She remembered naming him Luca in her mind, even though no one asked her for a name. And then, silence. A silence she had lived with for 20 years. Until now. Claire's hand trembled as she placed the photo down. You're him. Luca nodded. And suddenly, everything fell into place. The feeling she'd had on the bridge. The familiarity she couldn't name. The weight in her chest when he said his name. She hadn't imagined it. She had known. Claire stood slowly, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other against the wall as if to steady herself. Luca didn't move. He looked like a boy who had waited a lifetime to break. I didn't know, Claire whispered. I swear to you. I didn't know they gave you away. My parents told me. It doesn't matter, Luca interrupted. I'm not here to blame you. I didn't know where else to go. She walked to the window, staring out at the city swallowed in gray, her hand pressed flat to the cold glass. Then she turned back. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not yet. You ended up on that bridge, she said softly, and I was the one who found you. He nodded. And now you're here, she added. In this apartment. Sitting at this table. Yeah. Claire sat down again, this time slower, heavier, like gravity had grown stronger. You found your way back to me, she whispered. I didn't know I was looking for you, Luca said. I just wanted to stop hurting. And for the first time in 20 years, Claire reached across the table, her hand shaking as it found his. She didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't say I love you. She didn't say anything. Because some truths don't need to be spoken. They just need to be held. The city didn't slow down just because something impossible had happened. Outside, car horns still blared. Dogs barked from balconies. Somewhere, a neighbor argued about trash day like the world hadn't just folded in on itself behind Claire's apartment door. She and Luca sat at the table like two statues carved by time and regret. There was no script for this. No manual on how to be a mother to a grown man you didn't raise. No instructions for how to undo 20 years of absence. There was only breath. And silence. And that unbearable ache of everything that might have been. Claire finally spoke, her voice raw and low. Do you hate me? Luca didn't look at her right away. His thumb ran over the edge of the photo, like it was the only solid thing in the room. I did, he said quietly. For a long time. She closed her eyes. But I also made up stories, he continued. About why you left. Why you never came back. Some days you were a college student who got in trouble and ran. Some days you were sick or dead. Sometimes you were in a different country, painting murals or saving people. I needed it to be something more than abandonment. Claire wiped at the corner of her eye, but the tears didn't fall. Not yet. She wasn't ready to feel them. My parents, they told me it was a closed adoption. That it was the best thing for the baby. I only got to hold you for less than a minute. They didn't even tell me where you went. I begged to know. I wrote letters I never sent. And then one day I just stopped talking about it. Luca looked at her now. Not with anger, but with something more dangerous. Vulnerability. I always wondered if I passed you on the street, he said. If you were ever behind me in a grocery store or sat in the same movie theater. She shook her head slowly. I never stopped wondering who you were becoming. He leaned back in the chair. My adoptive mom died when I was 11. Cancer. My dad couldn't really handle it. He tried for a while, but eventually checked out. And I bounced between homes after that. Nothing stuck. Claire bit down hard on the inside of her cheek, trying not to drown in guilt. I'm so sorry. I'm not here for an apology, he said, more gently than she expected. I'm here because I didn't know what else to do. I found that photo in a box last month. I'd never noticed the hospital name before. Something just told me to come. She nodded slowly. That same hospital, it's where I ended up working later. The coincidence, if it could be called that, was too sharp, too intimate. As if the universe had been folding them toward each other all along, in slow, invisible ways. A door creaked softly behind them. Micah stood in the hallway, rubbing one eye, his hair flattened on one side. Mom. Claire stood quickly, wiping her face. Hey, baby. You're up early. He shuffled closer. Who's that? Claire looked at Luca, then back at her son. That's Luca. He's a friend. He's going to stay with us for a little while. Micah nodded like that was enough. He walked over to Luca without hesitation and extended a small hand. Luca blinked, startled, then shook it. Do you like peanut butter? Micah asked seriously. Because we have, like, a lot. Luca laughed softly. Yeah, I do. Claire watched them, something loosening in her chest. Later, after Micah had gone back to bed and the coffee had long gone cold, Claire turned to Luca. I know this isn't how it was supposed to happen. I can't change the past. I can't undo any of it. I'm not asking you to, he said. But I'd like to know you, she added. Not just because you're my son, but because you're here. Because somehow, after everything, the world brought you back to me. Luca nodded slowly. I'd like that too. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't healing. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And sometimes beginnings don't announce themselves with fireworks or revelations. Sometimes they arrive quietly. Like a photo on a table. Like a name spoken in a whisper. Like a knock on the door you never expected, answered not with fear, but with the simple, unsteady word. Stay. The next few days moved like the kind you don't talk about later, but they live inside you forever. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were quietly seismic. Claire kept going to work at the hospital. The night shifts were long, grueling. She washed blood off her hands. Listened to the hum of monitors. Whispered comfort to strangers in the middle of panic. And then she came home, to this new reality that hadn't yet settled into anything nameable. Luca stayed. He didn't ask for anything. He took the couch. He woke up early. Helped wash dishes. He made breakfast for Micah one morning when Claire came home too exhausted to move. Pancakes, too thin, too burnt. Micah loved them. Claire stood in the doorway watching them, something unnameable blooming behind her ribs. It hurt and healed at the same time. Later that day, she sat with Luca at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Tell me what you love, she said, almost shyly. Luca raised an eyebrow. I want to know who you are now, she explained. Not just who you were, or who I lost. Tell me what pulls you forward. Luca looked at the table. Then at her. I like photography. Claire smiled softly. Yeah. I like catching things people miss. Shadows. Faces. Things that don't want to be seen. She tilted her head. You ever show anyone your work? Not really. I post some stuff online, but I never put my name on it. Why not? He shrugged. Never felt like it mattered. Like I mattered. Claire reached across the table and touched his wrist gently. You matter. Even when no one's looking. Especially then. Luca looked at her, and for the first time in days, the shield in his eyes flickered. Like maybe, just maybe, he believed her. That evening, Claire brought out a box from her closet. Inside were old photos, letters, crumpled hospital papers. The hidden archive of a life she'd never dared to revisit. She placed one picture in front of Luca. A black and white ultrasound printout, edges frayed, the ink fading. That was you, she whispered. The first time I saw you. He didn't speak. His fingers traced the edge of the image slowly, reverently. I used to talk to you, Claire added. When I was alone at night. I'd press my hand to my belly and tell you everything I was afraid to tell anyone else. That I was scared. That I didn't feel ready. That I wanted to be better. Luca's voice was quiet. You were 17. Claire nodded. And terrified. He folded the photo gently and handed it back. Thank you for keeping that, he said. I didn't keep you, she replied, her voice breaking. But I kept everything else. Luca looked away, jaw tight. Claire wanted to apologize again. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the look in his eyes. Maybe it was the fact that some things don't need to be said more than once. Instead, she asked, do you want to meet Micah properly? Not just as my friend. Luca hesitated. What would you tell him? The truth, she said. That you're my first son. That I didn't get to raise you, but I'm grateful you found your way back. Luca let out a breath. Yeah. Okay. I'd like that. The next morning, Claire sat on the couch with Micah while Luca lingered nervously by the door. Remember how I told you about families? Claire said, brushing her son's curls from his forehead. How sometimes families look different. How sometimes they grow in unexpected ways. Micah nodded slowly. Like how you and me are a family, even without a dad? Exactly, Claire smiled. Well, Luca is part of our family too. He's my son. He's your big brother. Micah looked at Luca for a long time. Then, you like dinosaurs? Luca blinked. Yeah. Raptors are cool. Micah grinned. Okay. You can stay. Claire laughed, tears pressing against her eyes. Not from sadness. Not from guilt. But from the quiet miracle of acceptance. How children don't need explanations, just honesty. That night, after Micah had fallen asleep on Luca's shoulder during a cartoon marathon, Claire sat beside them and whispered, You're good with him. Luca glanced down at the sleeping boy, his expression unreadable. I didn't think I'd ever be good at anything. You're wrong, she said. And I think you're just starting to see it. They didn't talk about the past again that night. They didn't need to. Because sometimes healing isn't about excavating every old wound. Sometimes it's about holding the new gently enough that it can breathe. Claire never imagined how ordinary a miracle could look. It didn't arrive with fanfare. There was no swelling music, no final monologue, no sudden, sweeping gesture that resolved years of pain in one clean moment. Instead, it looked like laundry. Like cereal bowls in the sink and mismatched socks on the floor. It looked like Luca sitting with Micah at the kitchen table, explaining how clouds were made while doodling dragons in the corner of a newspaper. Like his laugh, still cautious but real, echoing through the apartment as if it had been there all along, just waiting to be invited back. Claire would catch herself standing in the doorway, watching them, a weight settling in her chest that had nothing to do with grief. It was something else. Something like relief. Like the quiet realization that not all losses stay lost. Some circle back. Some return not to rewrite the past, but to reimagine the future. But that didn't mean it was easy. One night, a week after Luca had moved in, Claire found him sitting alone in the dark, his back against the wall, knees pulled up to his chest. The light from the hallway fell just short of his face, casting it in soft shadow. She sat beside him without saying a word. They stayed like that for a long time. The kind of silence that asks permission to hold your pain, without trying to fix it. I don't know how to be a son, Luca finally said. Claire turned her head toward him. And I don't know how to be your mother. Not now. Not like this. He let out a soft breath. So what do we do? Claire thought for a moment, then reached out and took his hand. We learn each other. From here. Not from where we should have started. Luca didn't respond, but he didn't let go of her hand either. That was enough. One afternoon, Claire brought home an old photo album from her mother's attic. It was dusty, forgotten, pages stuck together from time and heat. She laid it open on the kitchen table while Micah napped on the couch, his hand still clutching a crayon like he had fallen asleep mid-adventure. Luca sat across from her. They flipped through the album slowly. Claire pointed at pictures of her younger self, at school dances, holding trophies, blowing out birthday candles with eyes full of dreams that would never quite unfold the way she imagined. "That's the girl who carried you," she said softly, tapping a photo of herself in a hospital gown, too thin, her face gaunt with exhaustion but lit up from the inside. Luca stared at it. "She looks like someone I used to see in the mirror," he murmured. Claire smiled faintly. "Maybe that's how we find each other. In pieces of reflection." He turned the page. Another photo fell out. This one wasn't in the album, it was loose, folded in half. Claire picked it up, startled. She hadn't seen it in years. It was a photo of her holding Luca. A nurse must have taken it. Her hair was tied back, face still wet with tears, the baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. She remembered that moment like a dream. How small he had felt. How heavy. How did this not get thrown away? Luca asked, his voice nearly a whisper. "Because I couldn't," Claire said. "Even when I was told to move on. Even when everyone said forgetting would be easier. I couldn't let go of you. Not really." Luca didn't say anything. But he took the photo, folded it carefully, and tucked it into his jacket pocket. That night, after Micah had fallen asleep, Claire and Luca stood in the kitchen, washing dishes side by side. He dried. She rinsed. It was a rhythm neither of them spoke aloud, but both slipped into naturally. Familiar. Like something they'd always done, even though they hadn't. Claire cleared her throat. "There's something I've been thinking about." Luca glanced at her, eyebrow raised. "I have a friend who runs a non-profit for teens in the foster system," she said. "They offer internships. Photography, design, storytelling, all kinds of things." Luca paused. "I'm not trying to push you into anything," Claire said quickly. When you talk about photography, your whole face changes. You come alive." He looked down at the dish towel in his hand, turning it slowly. "I wouldn't know where to start." "Start with the truth," she said. "With your eye. With what you see that others don't." He didn't answer. But the next morning, he asked for the contact information. By the end of the week, he had an interview. He didn't tell Claire how nervous he was. He just put on a clean shirt, borrowed one of her coffee mugs for the road, and left with a look that scared her in its vulnerability. When he came back hours later, he stood in the doorway for a long time, silent. Claire's heart sank. "It didn't go well?" He shook his head slowly. Then smiled. "They offered me a spot." Her breath caught. "Luca. I start Monday." She hugged him without hesitation. Tightly. Because this wasn't just a job. This was movement. This was him choosing life again. Not just survival. The weekend before his internship began, they went to the park together. Micah raced ahead, arms out like airplane wings, spinning in circles until he fell into the grass, dizzy with laughter. Claire sat on the bench while Luca took photos, of trees, of strangers, of Micah pretending to be a T-Rex, of Claire laughing at a squirrel that tried to steal a juice box. He was different behind the lens. Focused. Present. Alive. At one point, he turned the camera on her, mid-sentence. Claire looked up, half smiling, caught off guard. He snapped the photo. "What?" she laughed. "Nothing," he said. "I just wanted to remember you like this." "Like what?" "Here. Now. Not in pain. Not in regret. Just being." Claire blinked back tears she didn't expect. Because there it was. The moment. No fireworks. No music. Just a boy behind a camera. And a mother trying her best. And a story that didn't need to be rewritten, only continued. That night, Luca printed the photo. He framed it and gave it to her without a word. Claire hung it by the front door, just above Micah's kindergarten drawings and a key hook that never held enough keys. Every time she walked past it, she'd pause. Not because it was perfect, but because it was proof that sometimes, the things we lose find their way back to us. Not in the way we hoped, but in the way we needed. If you liked this story, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.